Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 6th of February 2012, the podcast that takes the calendar one day at a time. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's defenestrate the news of the bogus. Yet another active duty police officer has come out against the war on drugs, and yet again, he has to remain anonymous. He said that he'd found out that the drug war was nothing like what he'd been told before. Quote, "I just didn't see problems from illegal drug users that I've been led to believe. Most of the calls that we get on drug use as police are alcohol related. Alcohol is a serious drug that can be abused, but I just didn't see the calls on other drugs like I had been led to believe. I didn't see these drug-crazed people out there doing crazy things. I was always led to believe that the drug war was meant to stop all of these people from doing crazy things. But on the street, that's not what you see. That's a lie." He also said exactly where the funding for the big drug cartels comes from. Quote, "The money comes from the prohibition of drugs. These criminals are making their money because of the prohibition. If you legalize it and regulate it, their profits go to zero." His experience and arguments mirror the testimony of thousands of police, judges, and even prosecutors who are members of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, or LEAP. But these thousands of members are all retired because of the difficulties active duty officers face when they dare to tell the truth about what's going on out there, including threats of termination. Which is why it's hard to find active duty cops to speak out against the drug war, and when they do, they have to remain anonymous, like Mystery Cop. But in his own words, quote, "I did not get into law enforcement to destroy a person's future because that person had marijuana or a pill in their pocket. Why would you want to destroy that person's future and cause them great harm because of that? It's not worth it." He also said that many of his fellow officers agree. Quote, "There's plenty of officers that do want to get away from the petty, small drug arrests that distract them from fighting real crime, which is what a lot of them get into law enforcement for individually." It's not just police who are outraged at our insane drug policy, ordinary people are too, which is why questions regarding the war on drugs and marijuana legalization made 18 out of the top 20 most popular questions to the president submitted by users of Google+. Yet despite this, not a single one of them was answered by the president. For example, the number 2 most popular question was from retired LAPD officer Stephen Downing asking about the decriminalization of marijuana. Yet not only was this question not asked, it and other drug-related questions were skipped over in favor of questions about tennis, his upcoming wedding anniversary, and eating Snickers bars. According to a disclaimer on the submission site, the White House played no role in selecting the questions and were not allowed to see them ahead of time, but it's clear that someone at Google or YouTube was censoring questions they knew would be awkward for the president. And what was hailed as a unique opportunity for the voters, a step ahead in public interaction with high-ranking politicians, was turned into a sad, sad joke. More and more people are calling for an end to the insane and hideously destructive war on drugs. It's high time our politicians started listening to us. Shame on Google and everyone involved in this project for once again thwarting public discussion of this very important issue. Well, if nothing else, Judy Sanchez sure learned a valuable lesson about the destruction caused by the war on drugs when the FBI, as part of a massive drug and weapons raid, cut down her door with a chainsaw and ordered her to the floor, with her 3-year-old daughter screaming in the other room. Thing is, and you probably guessed this already, they were raiding the wrong apartment.
I just happened to glance over and seen this big chainsaw ripping down the side of my door. And I was freaking out. I didn't know what was going on. And saying, "FBI, get down." So I laid right on down. She said, "Get your dog." I got her. And at the same time, I'm like laying in her urine because she did pee on herself at the same time.
So after 35 minutes, the agents finally realized they've got the wrong apartment.
The looks on their faces when they knew they got the wrong door was priceless. They looked at each other dumbfounded.
So they went and got the real suspect, but left his door intact.
The FBI did apologize to the family, but Sanchez says it didn't really seem very genuine. Later that same day, an agent came by the apartment and gave Sanchez a phone number to pass along to her landlord so that the landlord could get reimbursed for fixing the busted door. And Sanchez says that was that?
And who wants to bet that, as usual, there will be no sanctions, no punishments, no accountability whatsoever for the damage these officers caused not only to a door, but to the psyche of a young mother, her 3-year-old daughter, and their 3-month-old pit bull puppy. Really, they got out easy compared to many other victims of mistaken drug raids. The family dog is often shot immediately on sight, and some people have even been killed by police even though they posed no threat whatsoever. These things are inevitable when you have the police enforce government rules that aren't really crimes. This was the result of 2 years of planning and investigation. There is no excuse for getting the wrong apartment. I mean, really, how often do UPS or FedEx deliver parcels to the wrong house? This isn't rocket science, people. If you can double check the address before delivering someone's iPhone, I would think you'd make even more sure of the address before you take a chainsaw to the door. It only goes to show how little regard law enforcement has for the people. Is it any wonder more people are speaking out against the drug war? Is it any wonder that the war on drugs is by far the most popular subject to ask the president about? We're told by statists all the time that the government represents the will of the people. What a bunch of smug, deluded, mealy-mouthed, apologetic bogosity. Now it's time to personally abuse this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Just in case you were thinking that wanton disregard for victims in the defending of one's personal politics was in any way limited to government, or even just an American thing, Javier Martinez, the Archbishop of Grenada, delivered a sermon saying that women who have abortions deserve to be raped. The comments came in the Archbishop's Christmas sermon when he said, translated from Portuguese, "A woman who has an abortion gives a man absolute license to abuse her body without restrictions, because she has committed a sin as if she had a right to do so." Yeah, I guess the fact that it's her body doesn't seem to make much of a difference to him. These remarks came after Spanish Prime Minister José Zapatero declared Spain a secular state after the Pope attacked the country's policy on abortion, which the Archbishop called the putrid secular abortion law. The Archbishop also said that Hitler and Stalin's crimes were less dreadful than abortion. Yeah, I guess you can kill all the people you want once they're born, right? Especially if they're Jews. What if someone who wasn't affiliated with a large religious organization like the Catholic Church were to publicly say something like that? I mean, it's one thing to condemn an act, one thing to say that such an act deserves this kind of retribution, but it's quite another to say that other people can now inflict a horrid punishment on her whenever they want. And it's just that kind of audacity that makes Archbishop Javier Martinez this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now it's time to issue a bug report for this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Tony Perkins is president of the Family Research Council. And if from that name you'd assume he's a credulous religiosoid fundamentalist wacko, you'd be absolutely correct. If you'd also assume that he'd be against homosexuality, you'd likewise be correct. But Perkins doesn't limit himself to what homosexuals do when they get together in the privacy of their own bedroom. He also wants to stop homosexuals from remotely interfacing with each other over the internet as characters in a computer game. Just listen to what he said in a radio address.
In a new Star Wars game, the biggest threat to the Empire may be homosexual activists.
Threat to your empire, maybe. But then, you're afraid your brand of hateful pseudo-religious politics masquerading as citizen activism is already on its way out, aren't you? That's why you're this desperate to manufacture controversy wherever you can.
In a galaxy not so far, far away, Star Wars gamers have already gone to the dark side.
Well, make up your mind. Are they a threat to the Empire, or are they on the dark side? Have you ever even seen Star Wars?
The new video game Star Wars, The Old Republic.
It's not a new video game. It was released back in October of 2008, although they have just released a Windows version. So you don't know anything about the gaming industry either, do you? Do you actually think that Windows computers are the whole world of gaming? Is it really too much to ask of you ultra-religious morons to do even a modicum of research about an issue before shooting off your ignorant mouths?
Has added a special feature, gay relationships.
No, they haven't. There aren't any gay characters in Star Wars: The Old Republic, nor is there the possibility of creating a homosexual character or having a homosexual relationship. There is a rumor that a later patch will have one, but that's all.
BioWare, the company that developed the game, said it's launching a same-sex romance component to satisfy some complaints.
No, they have not. In fact, they've specifically said that they're only putting in the game things that are in the Star Wars universe. And according to online community manager Sean Dahlberg, the concepts of gay and lesbian do not exist in that universe. And even if they were doing this, so what? How does two people interacting online in a computer game in any way lead to any problems that need to be addressed? Don't you think gay people already interact in online chat rooms, on Facebook, on anywhere else on the internet that people can talk to each other? Why pick on Star Wars? Just because it's popular and you're trying to gain some unearned attention? Well, you got attention, but of precisely the wrong kind.
Since the announcement, homosexuals have been celebrating the news, but parents sure aren't. On the game's website, there are more than 300 pages of comments, a lot of them expressing anger that their kids will be exposed to this star-warped way of thinking.
Funny, I looked around their site, I assume he's talking about the online forum there, and most of the complaints I see are about people not being able to do things like give gifts to someone of the same sex. There's also a lot of speculation about how this would work, some lamenting that it will never happen, some complaining that they put romances in at all. But I looked all over the forums and couldn't find even a single complaint by parents, much less 300 pages of it. Looks like Perkins is resorting to the age-old tactic of the religious fundamentalist: lying.
It's time to show companies who the Force is really with.
Yeah, because that's your answer, isn't it? Force. Force people to live their lives the way you want them to. Sorry, buddy, but that's not what America is all about. It's about the freedom to live your life as you see fit, as long as you leave everyone else alone to do the same. It's about freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and the freedom to look at a smug, self-righteous bigot like Tony Perkins and declare him to be this week's Idiot Extraordinaire! Well, that wraps up this dilettante edition of the Bogosity podcast. Please visit the forums at bogosity.tv, where you can read the show notes and participate in discussions about these subjects and anything else you'd like. And if you'd like to participate in the Bogosity podcast, you can send a question, statement, news article, or rant to podcast@bogosity.tv. If you put it in an MP3 file, it just might get played in the podcast. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from P.J. O'Rourke. No drug, not even alcohol, causes the fundamental ills of society. If we're looking for the source of our troubles, we shouldn't test people for drugs. We should test them for stupidity, ignorance, greed, and love of power. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 3.0 Imported License.